let's jump right in. I'm Breezy. I'm the head of growth at Correlated, and I'm joined by Grace and Tim today. So I'll toss it over to Grace to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you. I see a lot of familiar faces too, so that's really exciting. I'm Grace. I lead sales over at Reprise, and we are a demo and product experience platform, meaning we can take any software, no matter how complex, and PLG-ify it for you, put it front and center, and make it shareable and interactive for your prospects. So excited to chat about this with Breezy, Tim, and all of you today. Well, not about Reprise. This is not a product plug. About PLG, to be clear.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tim. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Correlated. We help companies that have a product-led growth go-to-market motion, build playbooks, and sort of build that motion out. So there's alignment across sales, marketing, customer success, et cetera. And as Grace said, we will not be actively pitching you Correlated, but obviously happy to talk about it after this conversation if anyone's interested in learning more.
So just a quick overview. I think it's just nice to have slides. This is basically just a way for us to frame the conversation that we're going to have today, but we're not going to be sitting here just showing you a bunch of stuff on slides. Like I said, it will be a sort of interactive conversation here. But so why the reason for Reprise launching started in the first place? We'll get into that a little bit. Some of the early days of shifting to a product-led growth strategy. What are some of the data points that we can look at there? What are maybe some bumps along the way, things to be aware of? Training your sales team to sort of shift from what would be a traditional sales-led motion to a more product-led motion. Again, some lessons learned, how to work with ops teams, things like that. We'll get into some of the nitty-gritty there. And then plans for the future, scaling starter. Are there other things that they're thinking about in the product-led space, and what we should be thinking about as we continue to scale this product-led motion. So with that, I just want to clear up and make sure that we have, a good framework to be talking about today, which is, I think there's still sometimes, and hopefully not with most of the people joining this conversation, but there's still sometimes a confusion around sales and product-led growth. Are they at arms with each other, or do they go together? And we're very much in the sake that they go together. In fact, 96% of product-led growth companies have sales teams. So it's not one or the other, but the combination of the two is the most effective way to kind of scaling and grow your company. So I guess even just pausing here, let's maybe talk about that and maybe some misconceptions or thoughts that you might have there, Grace.
Yes. So I actually used to have this misconception as well. So just a little bit. So I understand the sentiment that, oh my goodness, if you have a PLG approach, where does sales fit in? Where are jobs going, et cetera. So as a salesperson and sales leader, I definitely felt that. But it's not at all the case. What we've heard and what we've found is that implementing a product-led approach really early, right on the site, in your sales process, letting prospects experience your product as early and often as possible is extremely helpful for the sales team. So it's kind of our best friend and one of our not so secret weapons in our arsenal at Reprise, and for a lot of our customers, of course, as well. So yes, it's definitely a misconception. And, as you see, your Slack has a ton of people in sales, and many of them, not many of them, several of them I know personally, and you've got to hear about the experience of shifting from full-on product-led to really building on an enterprise sales team and sales motion. So it does really go hand in hand, and PLG is kind of sales' best friend, in my opinion.
Yeah, we already got one question in the chat I see from Bo, which is, I love when people look at a stat and put a question, because there's this saying that there are lies, damned lies in statistics. So I appreciate the questioning on the 4%. Are there any notable companies in the 4%ers that those companies are just too small? I don't recall seeing any large product-led companies on that list, but of course we can definitely fact check that one. And yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I'm a student of this stuff, so I think up until really this year, or maybe late last year, Zapier didn't have a sales team, and I think they just were actually maybe featured by OpenView or someone else, and And we've talked to some of the folks over there that are now starting to build a sales team. But I think if you were to look at, they would be a really good example of in that 4% where massive product-led growth, success, but no direct sales team really. But now that is starting to change. So, I would say there's like, a handful of these. Before Zapier, a few years ago, there was Atlassian, but it's been several years now since they have, had sales. Even earlier than that, or around the same time, maybe contemporaneous, was Slack. So Slack famously was like, hey, we're not selling, and we don't have sales here. So, but they all kind of eventually, got religion around how sales and PLG can work nicely together.
So let's jump into Reprise Starter. So let's hear the story from your point of view, Grace, on why make this switch, why Starter, what kind of prompted a change there?
Yes, absolutely. So just as a disclaimer, I would not call myself an expert, just someone who has made a lot of mistakes along the way. So hopefully you can learn from some of our missteps and mistakes as we went through this journey ourselves. So Reprise, we help companies take a PLG approach. But interestingly, we also had to go through this journey, which was very meta for us, of also taking a PLG approach with our PLG focused product. So it was interesting, and we can get into some philosophical conversations about it, but I won't do that. I won't put you through that. But we wanted to, this is something it's been a long time coming. So this was a very early on, a strategically important approach that we knew we needed to take as an org, actually predating my joining Reprise, which was last June. And so the initial, focus was really from the top down, this realization that not only do we believe in product-led growth, it's core to our mission to power product-led growth for all software companies. But also it's really how buyers want to buy. So I probably don't need to sell this group on PLG, but we really think about the B2C side where we're getting instant gratification. When we download an app, we can experience immediately. And we've just come to expect that as consumers. And it's still humans buying enterprise software. So there's this massive shift in mindset where we knew that this is how buyers want to buy. So we need to launch our own version of PLG. We need to reduce the friction at the top of the funnel, let people experience the product as early as possible with as little friction as possible, not jumping through 50 hoops of intense sales conversations to get there. So our version of PLG, our initial launch was this past November with Reprise Starter, which is our free version of the product. I don't want to go into too many tangents. I could go so many places in terms of the product preparation, thinking about the user experience, the onboarding experience, the business reasons why we knew we needed to take this approach from a pipeline generation, qualified pipeline, revenue perspective, competitive standpoint. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that we took this path. So where do you want me to go, Breezy?
Yeah, let's kick it off from the pipeline point of view, because I think that's always the end all be all. But so what was the thinking there?
Yeah, so meeting buyers where they are in the way that they want to buy was the primary one. We with our customers, we saw that when they took this approach, they had a massive improvement in their call to action conversion rates on their site. And so we were like, well, of course we want that too. So we should do that as well. We don't want a ton of traffic on our site that we just lose and they abandon cart effectively and don't move forward. We need to capture them and draw them in as well. We believe in this. This is the way. So we took a page from our best customers too, and that was one of the reasons. And we have seen a huge impact on pipeline. Since November, we've had, I think it's like 774, 775 signups on Starter. We've had early customer wins with them upgrading to Starter Plus, which I can get into, this expansion path, and then also coming on as full customers since we launched. So that was a big impetus for us.
Nice. Okay, so you see from your prospects and customers that this is kind of like a preferred buying path for them. You're probably getting some feedback from them that this is kind of how they'd like to purchase. You're making the business case internally on, additional pipeline and reducing friction along that way. And then what are the conversations like internally that are starting to prompt, okay, maybe we should actually, take action on this and launch here?
Yeah, so I think a number of factors that culminated into this decision. One was certainly, our competitive pressures in the lower portion of the market. So knowing that competitors were coming online, really focusing on this segment, and that we are, an enterprise grade solution, which we have customers that are 50 employees or fewer that have a real focus on PLG, but we also have, publicly traded, very, very large companies as well as customers. And so we really wanted, internally we're having this conversation around, we believe in our mission, which is product-led growth for any software company. And to do that, and to do it in a way that makes sense from a business perspective, maintaining our average selling price when you have a sales team involved, we really need to have this particularly lower end of the market, or individual folks at enterprise companies that just want to sign up and try it out. We need to serve them. And the way to do that is by reducing the sales involvement at the very front end. And granted, there's still a sales play and a sales approach with those signups, of course, which we can talk about. But that was a big reason why we knew we wanted to serve those customers. We have demand for it. We have interest, but ultimately you needed a path that allowed them to try it, free, and then upgrade at a rate that makes sense for those types of businesses. So those were a lot of conversations. Tim, what are your thoughts?
So a quick question from me, which might be on the minds of folks in the audience as well. And we hear it a lot from people we talk to as well. How did you, in sharing what you feel comfortable sharing, of course, in public, but how did you start to think about pricing? You mentioned the Starter Plus, this like expansion path from Starter to Starter Plus. How did you start to think about pricing like beyond that? And I think one fear we hear is about like cannibalization. Like, will, the sales team who like are working deals in like a traditional way now, will they feel like someone will just go to the free or the less expensive Starter Plus package, and then that will, really dramatically impact in a negative way the sales side? So yeah, curious your thoughts on how you navigated some of that internally, and yeah, any tips and tricks there would be great.
Love the question. We had so many conversations about that, actually. And of course, we have an amazing commercial team, and they focus on companies from 100 employees to 750 employee count. So that was actually a fear of mine initially that I really wanted to hash out and think through and talk about with the executive team, with the sales leadership team. So I'm glad you raised that. Was what's the risk to our active pipeline and potential future pipeline. Ultimately, we talked about this a lot and realized a few things. One is that it was really important that our pricing and packaging strategy for our full on paid version, like that there's a seamless transition from free to Starter Plus, which is a low cost, month to month, a little bit more usage, a little bit more functionality, but not the full product, up to our full paid, enterprise grade platform. So the price, to assuage that concern about cannibalization, the pricing and product differentiation had to be airtight. So we put a lot of thought into not only the numbers, but what is and is not included at every tier, and is the product capability that's included compelling and something that we can really equip the sales team with clear differentiation points and clear talk track and clear communication around why it is valuable to go up the path. So that was one thing. It requires put a lot of thought into that. I would say it is really important. But the other thing is, we really felt that as an executive team, the trade-off, the short-term trade-off, was nothing compared to the long-term benefit to our business. And that was ultimately the decision we made. We did look at the pipeline. We looked at what's the potential risk, which of these opportunities might be, really price sensitive or in that lower segment that would go with, Starter Plus or Starter, should we make that shift. And it was a relatively small amount of, I think it was 10% of our pipeline that would potentially be, be at that point. But really, we felt that they would potentially be best served by this approach. And ultimately, we want them using Reprise, loving Reprise, getting benefit from it. And then as they grow and as it makes sense, being able to come on to the full platform. So we thought the trade-off just made a lot of sense for us. I think I answered your question. There's one more thought floating around that I can't nail down, but did I hit on everything you asked about?
That was fantastic. I mean, the one maybe follow up, and apologies, Breezy, if we were planning on getting in this in some of the material later, but the one follow up would be, from a pricing standpoint, you mentioned like that graduation, and this might be getting too in the weeds, but I can't help myself. Did you guys employ usage-based pricing, and was that like part of the consideration for that like 10% that you felt was at risk? And like, did you have to like change anything, or was it sort of, you kind of had a good feel for kind of where things were, and you didn't really have to meddle that much? It was just more adding new, like a tier that didn't exist before below where you had it, the existing product.
We had to meddle a lot. We did a lot of meddling. So interesting. Our solution, I'm obviously a spokesperson for Reprise, so I'm a big believer in our differentiation versus other solutions out there. But there are newer solutions popping up in the market. This is a very, the product demo experience space is red hot. It's exciting. Lots of new companies popping up, and they're trying to win their first customers, so they're extremely aggressive on unlimited low-cost pricing options, some of them. So we felt that, and that was something we had to think about with usage-based pricing, and where do we put the limits, and in a way that is super compelling and value additive for starter and starter plus customers, while also not cannibalizing the opportunity in our commercial segment. So one of those things we had to think about a lot was, we had an initial idea of question of what are the usage factors that what usage-based pricing levers are we going to go with effectively? We can think about the number of product tours that they create. We call them replays. Or do we look at number of users? Or is it solely based on product capability unlocks? Or a final one is it truly usage-based in terms of its number of views of the replays, sessions, we call those. So we went around and around about this, thinking about it from every direction to ultimately land with pricing that is tied to, it's actually module-based, use case-based pricing. So it's relevant to the particular way the product is being used. Without going too in the weeds, it worked for us, but I think there are a number of things to think about there. And it's obviously, as you know, it's tricky and there are trade-offs.
Thank you for tolerating my in the weeds question. Sorry, go ahead.
I hope I answered it well, like in the weeds enough.
Bo, you want to ask your question live?
Yeah, I don't know. Is my mic working? Just to get more in the weeds, I guess, when you're talking about meddling, I was wondering, especially when you're transitioning and like opening up a free plan, there's like a tendency, especially from like operations folks, to have like everything set up and all the docs written and everything perfect before you launch like your new free plan or whatever your new tiers are. So at a company like Reprise, which is obviously like growing super fast, I guess my question for you is, were those newly designed tiers and that transition to PLG, was it like pretty iterative? Like, were you making a ton of mistakes and then fixing them as you were going forward and communicating that with sales? Or did you like really try to do your utmost to make it perfect before you went to market with a new plan in order to like reduce the friction with sales? Because I think that's like a question or something that a lot of people have to deal with, I guess.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think we tried to minimize, and I think I would give us a C on minimizing the disruption to the sales team, and maybe a C+, if I'm being nice. But we did, so one of the mistakes I made, actually, I might be our wonderful sales ops director's worst nightmare at times. I tend to be an ideas person, very high level, very action oriented. Let's do it. Let's go with it. Let's run with it. So she keeps me very honest, but certainly looping in hops early is really important. I think, Bo, to answer your question more directly, I was very concerned about rolling it out and then thinking that we might have to change it a lot. So we actually got it pretty locked in. We had exec level conversations. I had conversations with my sales leadership team. We had cross-functional, conversations with ops, with marketing, with product, to come to, and really worked up, how does our, contracting system work with this? How do we implement automatic billing? And so we took a somewhat phased approach. We launched Starter first. So there was no upgrade path within Starter. We knew that we needed to do it quickly. So I would say we tried not to fall into analysis paralysis. We tried to actually take steps and go with it, even though it wasn't perfect. And I would recommend that. I would recommend going forward with your best guess at what will work. So we started with just Starter Plus, which was free version. We outlined what was included, what wasn't included, but it was starter, and then it was, nothing. And then it was full on enterprise sales motion platform purchase, at 40K price tag and plus. So we then, once we implemented starter, we actually did see some companies upgrade from free starter all the way to our full on version, which was exciting, but we realized there's just this large area between starter and our full version. So that's where that was the biggest iteration and learning point. We had it in mind that we might do that, but then once we launched it, we realized we really did need this upgrade path. I feel like I'm dancing around your question, Bo, so I hope I've somewhat hit on it. I think to sum it up, I would say for me, we have a sales team of, a whole sales org of 50 people. I don't take a change like this lightly, because it is real. Change management is really tough. Training is really tough. Getting people to actually change behavior is very challenging. So I did try to work out a lot of those details, but I did have some misses on not looping in ops as thoroughly as I should have, for example, early on. And so I would say go for it, but be smart about it. Tim and Breezy, would you add anything?
No, I mean, I think that's usually what I'll say to folks as well, is like, you're never, even if you think you got it perfect, so to speak, you're going to have to change it. And even if it was perfect in 3 months, you're going to have to change it. So, you have to don't let great get in the way of good enough, or whatever the best phrase is there. But at some point you do just have to kind of go for it and make changes afterwards.
Better is the enemy of good, or something. I think
something along those lines.
Yes, it won't be perfect. You will find the mistakes that you've made after.
Yeah. And I have a question just for the audience, just as we get into a little bit more of talking about the early wins and that inside of Starter. But who is currently at a product-led company or thinking about a product-led growth strategy, or is there anyone on here who's kind of, hopefully maybe it's everybody, but is there anyone who's kind of thinking about this shift now and sort of in this, currently at a PLG org? I see a few chats in there. And then I know just by name a few of you on the call and kind of the stage of company that you're at as well. Reprise. Oh, nice. Some of your coworkers are in here as well. Awesome. Okay, cool. So we've been talking about it already, but let's talk about some of who was signing up. What was the experience like for the user? And we've talked a little about the starter, and then we moved to Starter Plus, and we'll get into more on Starter Plus in a bit. Or, I mean, you're welcome to kind of mix it in, but I guess just in kind of those early days, what was it like? Who was signing up? What was conversion like, et cetera?
Yes, all good questions. So yeah, there was an enormous focus from our product team, of course, on Starter, on building it out in a way that creates a good first impression. I think you get one chance to wow people and to create a good experience up front. And so that is a huge focus, the onboarding experience, the sign-up experience, making sure it's guided and really curated and tailored to the person and brings them through naturally, and it helps them educate, especially because we have a solution that, and I'd be curious sort of how the folks here would rate the complexity of their solution. We have it's easy to use, but it's super powerful. There is a lot of capability. There's a lot you can do with it. So that was really a thought exercise and an actual exercise of making sure that we created a good first experience and onboarding experience for users. Our signups really ran the gamut, especially initially, as you can imagine. We got a lot of signups that just would not be in our ideal customer profile, or ICP. But we also had, so really we had individuals, we had companies that were really, really small that just probably wouldn't be a good fit. But again, great that they can use Reprise and start exploring it. But then we also did have a kind of surprising amount, I don't have the exact numbers, but surprising amount of actual potential future customers sign up, which was super exciting. I was one of my biggest surprises was how well received it was, how many signups we drove really quickly. I mean, it was like a big curve, growth curve on signups. And then, you know, we, as I mentioned, since launching our starter campaign, our starter product, we had very quickly a starter sign up turn into a paying customer within the first month, which was really exciting to see. And then, you know, since launching Starter Plus, we've had folks sign up for and pay for Starter Plus as well. So we've had some good early wins. We're continuing to keep an eye on it and think about where do we go next from here and all that. But initially, to answer the third question, it was product who led the initiative initially. We're lucky in that one of our co-founders is also our head of product, and he's a really brilliant product mind. So it was natural from a strategic perspective for him to take a big role in that. But since launching, it has fully started to live with marketing. Marketing owns Starter and Starter Plus in terms of, you know, the tracking and the follow through. We have a lot of automation, but also a clear outline of when sales gets involved and how sales gets involved, which we can talk about. Yeah, and again, surprises was that it was really successful. We were thinking it would be because we believe in PLG, but I think we were all blown away by how successful it actually was. To be honest, didn't fully expect that. It was exciting to see.
Always a good surprise when it happens in the right direction. I saw Caitlin, you had a question as well, and I know you're on camera, so do you want to come off mute and maybe ask that one?
Yeah, I was just curious, Grace, you had mentioned that you have a sales op director function that you lean on a lot for like that level set. When did that function emerge during your growth journey?
Pretty early, in part because I've felt the pain as a sales leader of not having sales ops. So Phoebe actually is our director of sales ops, and she came on board even separately from the Starter and Starter Plus PLG approach. We needed her for so many reasons with our tech stack, but she's been integral in terms of bridging all of the different solutions we have and trying to get product data, usage data and HubSpot over into Salesforce and all of these things that the Correlated team is nodding about vigorously. So that for us, that was really important in terms of tracking and aggregating the information and actually surfacing it proactively, making good use of the information we're getting from product usage. However, to be totally candid, we hired her, just completely separately from this project because we just really needed her. And Caitlin, you're at a PLG company, right? I'd be curious for your thoughts and your experience on that.
Yeah, a lot of that resonates. Like we're kind of at a crossroads where it's like establishing ops to support the PLG functionality because we already have free versions. We have like our pricing mapped out. We've gone through some of the clunky journey where you try to play with pricing and see how that affects sales. And so I think now it's just, or I guess getting insights into like when to bring on a more like hefty SDR type team that before having like that ops foundation that could make it stray away from the PLG functionality that you've already ingrained.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yep.
Any other questions I said one from Eric. Eric, do you want to ask it live or do you want me to? Yeah, perfect.
So this is just a crazy hypothesis, but the idea is like your power users turn into communities, which turns into market share. And so like what I think that like when I see free in a GTM motion, my thought first is like some people are going to leave their role before the sales cycle has had a chance to play out, and that's not a bad thing. So were you guys able to capture any cross-sell growth, for lack of a better term here, when you're talking about like, okay, someone starts using free, they like it, their team didn't come with them, they did, then they go somewhere else? Because like a lot of places that the team doesn't come with people, that's even a bigger indicator that they're going to go somewhere else. And so in my mind, those become kind of like dandelion seeds going between the companies. And I'm just wondering if you saw any of that.
I love that. We have not seen it yet related to Starter and Starter Plus specifically. Granted, this is relatively new. We launched Starter in November and Starter Plus in January. So it's early days, but I fully believe that is the case. I agree with the dandelion seeds. We're trying to create that network. And something we've been thinking about as well is how we actually turn those starter and starter plus users and really into a community and build more of a user community. We call it our community of nerds, primarily because our head of solutions engineering is most passionate about this, and he calls himself that. And that's what he is thinking of, Reprise nerds. So yes, we haven't seen it yet. Like, it hasn't played out, but I do believe that is a valid point and a good way to be thinking about it. We want to create these champions who are getting to experience the product. And then when they do move roles, which again is, yes, as you mentioned, happening at a very high rate, they remember and want to bring Reprise to their new company. We've seen that without starter and starter plus, just from our traditional sales motions, which has been great, but I'll keep you posted.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about training the sales team. I think that's a tough one. I thought this little gift from Schitt's Creek, if anyone has seen the show, is a good one, but
Love the show.
It's a big shift, right? Like, it's not night and day, but there's still like a lot of nuances that go into being a salesperson at a company that makes your product readily available. It changes the way that you sell. There's probably some fear from the sales team initially. So let's talk a little bit about what that was like.
Yes. So I think you teed it up with the first couple of slides that you shared, Breezy, the misconception around, okay, it's either product-led growth or sales. We are fortunate at Reprise in that we know about PLG and we sell a product that helps other companies take a PLG approach. So our sales team was therefore much more comfortable, I think, than a lot would be with the shift, and excited for it, because we believe in it, and we really think this is the way of the future and the way that buyers even today want to buy and experience a sales process. So with that said, training is still super, super important, both from a handling any potential concerns about what does this mean for my job perspective, but also because, it's a different approach. It requires different workflows, different types of conversations with those product qualified leads, which we can talk about how we define those at Reprise. People who sign up and are using the product, they don't want the same experience as someone who, necessarily as someone who is requesting a demo or requesting to talk to sales, for example. So it requires a different approach. So with that said, we did put a lot of emphasis. I have an amazing enablement manager, Alicia. And so we did a lot of collaboration with marketing and product to create a training for the sales team that included, the flow. What is a PQL? What is the marketing automation that will touch and nurture and educate folks that sign up? And then what is the trigger point for when sales gets involved? When sales gets involved, what is the content that they should send via outreach? So we created templates and sequences. Also, how do you structure a call with this type of lead? How do you call them up, and what's the talk track? For us, it was really about making it a much more consultative, like training based approach with the selling motion. So when the salespeople they're coming in to help to understand, what prompted you signing up, how can I help you build, giving suggestions about how to take their product towards to the next level with Reprise, that sort of thing, to then vet out if this is a larger initiative worth exploring. So thinking about that, with BDR involvement, marketing, AEs, who gets involved when, and having that conversation with ops, enablement, marketing, and product was for us really key to then turn it into an actionable sales training that set our team up for success and clarity in terms of what this means for them.
Yeah. Were there any, I guess, what were sort of the biggest things that the team felt like they needed to have that training on? And then were there some things that maybe missed along the way that were like, oh yeah, maybe we should have enabled here better, or we did enable this really well and I'm glad that we did. So like, let me share that with others. I guess, what were some of the key moments in there?
Yeah, I think things we thought were really key was the framing and the mindset of how to have the conversations with those PQLs. how aggressive to be, how in their face to be versus consultative. That's the tone to take, the approach to take, the types of questions asked. That was all important. I think I would say all of it we could have done a better job of always, and could have done more of. We're running 1,000,000 miles an hour, so things do, things go fast.
Grace, if you ever need help doing more or finding ways to further segment who you're reaching out to, just let us know. We'll wrap it up.
I thought we weren't doing any pitches.
I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry.
I'm
gonna mute Tim now. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, I appreciate it. Yeah, we could probably talk, as you know. So hilarious. One of the things that I think we got right by the time we rolled it out to sales, but there were hiccups along the way, was the flow and making it clear when someone signs up, like diagramming it really and showing it to the team. When someone signs up, what is their journey? What is their experience? So that they have that context. Same as, if you have a handoff from a BDR, like you need to know, were they an unwilling taker of this meeting? You kind of dragged them kicking and screaming to your discovery call, or are they super excited? They were actually already evaluating competitors. Like you need the context. You need to know what has their journey been, so you can then tailor your approach. So we had trouble sort of mapping it out. We definitely had some tweaks and changes along the way in terms of the marketing automation versus when should a salesperson get involved, and should it be a BDR or should it be an AE? What volume are we expecting? Where do we want our reps focused on? Like all of these considerations were super important for, I think we had some hiccups along the way that we're, continuing to sort out and refine. Like I said, not an expert, just someone who's made a lot of mistakes. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. I see a question from Kurt. I know you're not on camera, but if you want to ask the question, feel free. Give you a couple seconds to jump on, and if not, then I'll just ask it out loud. All right, I can do it. So it says, backtracking a little bit, what went into the decision-making process about what features and limits to include in the Starter versus Starter Plus? I see that both seem to have the same feature sets, and the pricing lever seems to be usage. For us, a social media management platform, we have conversations about which core tools should be gated and only available to paying customers versus what we're comfortable offering for free.
Yes. Okay. So Starter versus Starter Plus in particular, which again is our free versus our slightly not free, but still affordable month to month option. So yes, that's a fantastic question. We, in order to figure out generally our tiers, from Starter all the way to our full platform, one of the things we looked at was, we collaborated with our head of customer outcomes, Nadia, who pulled data on our actual customer usage, what they're using, to what extent, how many users do they typically have, how many replays, et cetera, to find and it also somewhat anecdotally looking at our pipeline, the opportunities that were smaller, but still time consuming and maybe not quite ready for our full pricing, full packaging. We looked at all of that together to understand, where the breaking point should be. And so ultimately we did land on Starter versus Starter Plus. They have the same capabilities. And this is something we're looking at still, by the way. So we're continuing to think about, is this the right approach? So far, it's been good. But we decided to base it on replays and usage. Yes. So number of published replays they can create, a number of users they can have. I think it really depends on, again, thinking about all of those factors of, we don't want to totally cannibalize our active pipeline. We don't want to create something that all of our customers could go from, would just need to go to Starter Plus. But we want it to be compelling enough. So we thought about all those factors to come to ultimately that increase in users and replays. We figured that if it's one person, they can use Starter just fine, most likely. But if they have a real use case, when they start to have a real use case and maybe they're collaborating with a couple folks from their team, they actually want to publish these replays and put them on their site or share them around. That's the point at which they're comfortable upgrading to that. So I would do customer interviews, look at the data, have those conversations cross-functionally, look at your active pipeline. It's a lot of moving pieces, but that's how we did it. And again, not perfect, but we decided to not good is or great is the enemy of good, or better is the enemy of good, and we needed to go forward with it and test it in the field and see how it lands and what those friction points were with folks that upgraded.
We have a question here from Paula, or maybe Paula, not sure. I don't know if you want to come off and ask the question, but otherwise it says, how did you identify the right signals that sales reps should use to reach out to these PQLs? And I know, Tim, that you obviously think about this quite a bit. So I'd love to hear what you're doing today,
bite my
Grace,
tongue.
and then
I'm gonna wait, Grace.
yeah, I'd like to hear what you're doing today, Grace, and then
I'll be
Tim,
super quick.
Chime in with kind of like what you're seeing as well afterwards.
Yeah, I haven't heard enough from Tim yet. I'm ready. I'm excited for it. So tired of hearing my own voice.
I know. Fill up your water again. You're gonna need it.
I know. It's running out. And this is a giant glass, by the way. So we define our product qualified leads as signups who publish a replay. So we actually track several things before that in terms of what they do in the actual Starter Plus product. So when they sign up for Starter, we're looking at, just their usage across platform, but ultimately the trigger point. So before that, they're getting nurtured with marketing with helpful tips and tricks and hints and more educational material. When they publish a replay or they publish a product tour, meaning they created, a demo or product experience, a tour of their software that's interactive and shareable. They publish it, so they actually can share it out, they can post it, etc. Folks can then view it. That's the point at which, by our assessment, that's one of our success metrics too in onboarding, right? Is like we look at the usage and are they really implemented? Are they really onboarding? And when they publish a replay, that's a big signal for us in terms of retention and stickiness. So looking at that, we backtracked into that's our PQL, is when they publish that replay, that is then when the sales rep gets notified. So if it's a customer account, the customer outcomes team is notified. If it's an opportunity AE or it's rotated based on territory, then the sales rep gets involved and they follow that playbook we trained them on. Wasn't as short as I hoped, but over to you, Tim.
No, that's great. And I would say the reason why I wanted you to go first is because this will be a slight pitch to Correlated. But essentially what we do is kind of help companies do PQLs, but our way of doing it is sort of like different than maybe kind of the state of the art or standard way that it's done today. So most companies sort of do, I think, what you described, Grace, more or less, which is, can we put together some aggregate set of either actions and combined with maybe firmographic fit? So is this fitting in our ICP? Is this a company with more than 100 employees? And do they have like someone with a VP title? So like different like things that might tip over into like the ICP, and then combine that with something like what you described. Have they like maybe performed have they invited 5 people in? Have they performed this action in the product, like doing a replay? So we see that as like commonly then kind of scored up and given like a number or given some sort of grade. Where I think we have a bit of a different philosophy is we like to actually look at the components of what goes into these different signals and then actually push any number, it could be more than just one, out to sales. And so in different ways, like you could get it in the form of like a lead routed into like Salesforce, for example, or get someone to be sent a personalized message through HubSpot, so more of a marketing automation email, or get it attached to Outreach and have the content match. So a lot of the things that you're doing, Grace, it sounds like that you have kind of put together are things that we recommend. But we allow you to do it in like much more level of complexity, and then you can like test what's working and what's not. So anyway, that's kind of where we push back a little bit against like the traditional PQL. And the live event we did last month was actually on this exact topic. So if you want to hear me really talk about this in way more detail than right now, you can listen to that recording or check out that deck.
There's one question too from Brian here. Actually, Brian, are you off camera? Or you're on camera? Yeah, do you want to ask that one?
Yeah, sure. Grace, you mentioned earlier that some of the qualified leads coming in through your PQLs are, smaller companies that may not necessarily qualify for the full product. So I was just curious, from the people that are coming in through your PQLs, your product-led growth, how are they converting at a higher, lower rate than say MQLs or just your typical outbound leads? How is that compared to what you're currently doing in other places?
Yes, yes, they are. They do. They convert at a higher rate. Assuming yes that they are sales qualified and we accept them into the pipeline, we see a 30% higher win rate on those opportunities versus other sources, like in aggregate. That's also the case, for our customers. That's actually lower than a lot of our customers see. But again, we're early days and we are still figuring it out for how we do it internally. But yeah, we do see a big improvement, and they're more qualified. They understand the product. It's a quicker sales cycle. Again, limited data thus far. So we're in early days, but I would love to report back in a few months or a year and really give you the full summation. But so far, it's just one of our biggest friction points is early in the process, educating people, taking a challenger approach, really sharing, all of the information on why they need to make a change and why now. When they've experienced the product, that part of the process is so much shorter and the conversion rate is much, much higher. So it's been super positive for us. Again, limited data, but yes. Are you implementing anything like that, Brian, yourself? And have you seen something similar?
We're not currently just yet, but I can see the value in doing something like this and how powerful it could be.
Let's jump a little. I'm going to kind of tie these two topics together, but maybe some lessons learned along the way, as well as sort of what those have led you to think about some future plans here.
Well, clearly buying Correlated is one of them.
Likewise, and we'll just do a little swap here on software.
I've got some good ideas for you, Grace. I got something for you after this conversation. We'll talk more.
Send me a replay of Correlated using Reprise and we'll talk. So lessons learned: involve ops early and earlier than you think you should. So even if you think it's at the beginning, involve them before you even start. Do that and they will thank you, and everyone will thank you. That was a lesson learned for me. I think also, frankly, we underestimated probably the amount of dialogue needed to align across multiple functions on all these different factors that we've discussed today. The pricing and packaging strategy, that alone is a huge strategic element, even without PLG. And so it's a big, very important conversation. So loop in the team, loop in the right people and have that conversation. Don't underestimate how big that conversation is and the amount of dialogue that needs to, and thought that needs to go into it. That's one of the big lessons learned. Make sure you're aligned on all of that, and then make sure your systems work together. I guess there are tools out there to help with this that would have made it less painful for us. Not naming any names, but yeah, feeding the data through the different systems was certainly difficult and a pain point, required a lot of work and effort. So you should probably buy something like Correlated to help you with all of that. But in terms of future plans, in all seriousness, although I'm serious about that, it was really painful. I think we're thinking a lot about how does this change or impact potential promotion paths internally. How are we going to think about deploying team members, individuals or a team towards farming those starter and starter plus signups and expanding them and growing those accounts. That's something that is really, it's nascent in our thinking, but we are starting to think about that. And then also we need to, and we will continue to look at the usage and whether the pricing levers and the expansion path makes sense. I think there's tons of room for refinement there from our side, and something we'll continue to look at and track and monitor, not making any knee-jerk changes because it doesn't, at the moment, it feels like it's working solidly, but I think it's something we need to keep considering as we look at where we're focusing our account executives and what our strategy is overall. So again, refining pricing, hiring profiles, how this impacts hiring profiles, and then the pricing across the product. I think I already said that. So 2 things, maybe.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like, obviously so far to this point, it's always a bumpy road. It's never smooth there, but I think from this conversation and others that I've had with you and the team as well, I think you guys obviously have had really great success from this. And that I would probably venture to say that the pain along the way was probably worth where you are today and continue to grow from. Tim, I'm curious from your point of view, thinking about, scaling the product-led motion and just from your conversations with other companies about, kind of what you're thinking on Reprise Starter versus Starter Plus, and maybe some insights along there as well.
I was slightly distracted. I signed up for Reprise Starter and was actually about to create a replay while you're doing that. So
He's becoming a PQL as we speak.
was
Amazing.
this close to being a PQL. It's very fast. Yeah, so I think like the big thing we see as companies get from where I think it sounds like you are, Grace, at Reprise, as they get past this like initial phase of it's working, things are like starting to really click here, marketing starting to actually probably pour in content and pushing to get top of funnel filled, to get that, from 700 or so you said to, let's can we get 700 a month? Can we get, how big can we make this? How big can the top of funnel be? And then as you get people going from like starter to starter plus up to that more enterprise package, and maybe in the future of Reprise, I'm sure you'll have multiple products. Where we see a lot of companies go, especially some of the more mature SaaS companies that we talk to, is how can we help like the full life cycle, all the way from like initial sign up and like activation to onboarding to hit that aha moment where sales should get engaged, through to kind of you're a customer, there's multiple products you can buy, you can expand your usage, you can spend, from starting at $500 or whatever it might be a month to $100,000 a month, maybe one day. How do you get from that level to $1 million a year customer? What's the full life cycle look like, and how can you start to really orchestrate that using product data, using the various teams, whether it's marketing, sales, customer success, solutions engineering? How do all those teams work together in concert to make it happen? And so some of the cool use cases that we support, and just what we see in PLG in general, are spanning all these different teams within companies, marketing, sales, CS, et cetera, and how do they work collaboratively together to get customers to be as successful as possible and spend more money. So I think you'll probably see that, I'm guessing, Grace, over the next year or two, as things start to expand for Reprise on the product line front, cross-sell and expansion. You'll start to think more holistically about your customers going from initial sign up all the way through to becoming amazing multi-product customers down the line.
Yeah, we have one question here from Eric too on including channel partnerships, ecosystems in that PLG motion. I don't know if that's something that you're thinking about today, or you, Grace, or you, Tim, as well.
I'd love to hear from Tim. This isn't something that we've, we're not there.
Yeah, for us, it's like the nature of our product is one of like an integration approach. So we've partnered closely with some of like the startups that are adjacent to us. Reverse ETL is like a funny name for a category, but these are companies called like High Touch or Census. I think Bo, you work at Census, right? And so we're starting to work with some mutual customers there, and starting to partner a bit with them. We also connect to things. Yeah, time for Bo to pitch. We also connect to tools like Outreach and SalesLoft, and we've started to partner a bit with them. So I mean, I think for us, and we have we do have a PLG motion, but it's not as sort of advanced as our kind of more sales led motion. But we are starting to do more partner selling as a result of like our just product approach. So we see it a bit there. Happy to talk more about specifics maybe offline on some of the customers we see as well, Eric, and kind of what they do on the partner side.
Any other questions from the audience? I have really appreciated the back and forth throughout, so this is great. Thanks, everybody.
I have another question for Grace, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So first of all, thank you for that. I don't know if there was a slide, before, and I don't know if you made the slides or if the folks over at Correlated made the slides, but basically you mentioned that your PQL was when someone like recorded a video and published it, yada yada yada. Not yada yada yada, but to me yada yada yada. I guess my question is, does Reprise currently not have any like is there no path or route that someone could take on the product in order for them to get to like self-serve billing without getting at least one touch from a salesperson? And is that like on purpose, or do you guys even have self-serve billing right now? That's something that we're thinking a lot about at our company.
Yes. So we do have self-serve billing for Starter Plus. We initially, when we launched Starter, that was an active evaluation to figure that out. That was led by our ops team. But when we launched for us to launch Starter Plus, we knew that it was important to have self-serve billing, no sales touch required, right in the product. So we did implement that, and we do have that. So folks can sign up and they can pay and go on a month-to-month plan with Starter Plus with Reprise. So we that was important. In terms of the touch, we're pretty light touch. You know, if someone does publish a replay, they will get a touch from sales, but it's super, again, product first and friendly and consultative. And we're not treating those overly aggressively or immediately trying to pigeonhole people into a sales conversation. So it's more consultative, more of a training focus. How can I help? Or congrats on your first published replay. Looks really good. Here's a couple of ideas type of thing. So that's more of the playbook we're touching. So yes, they do get a touch, but they can also self-serve right through the app. And to be clear too, the folks that are getting a touch these are people that also are qualified accounts as well. So if we know that their account we want to talk to, they're in the ICP, that sort of thing, and they publish a replay, then they're getting that touch. So not everyone is getting the same exact approach from a sales perspective.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much. Thanks, Grace. Thanks, Tim. Everyone for all the questions along the way. Wrap up 2 minutes early so everyone can prep for that next call. And we will send the recording of this. We don't gate it, so it'll just be up on YouTube. You'll be able to access it there. I can also send the slides if that's helpful at all. But otherwise, good to see all your faces, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you all so much. Nice to see you. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.